to Back with your host, Chris Ellison. On Back to Back, we feature a lineup of Christian music, and most of it is Canadian. We love Canada, and we love our Canadian artists. We want to showcase their music on this show. We'll feature reviews, artist interviews, and we'll play some of their songs. So stay tuned, and thanks for joining us on Back to Back.
Back to back, stronger together.
Well, welcome back to Back. I'm Chris Ellison, and I'm here with Jordan Janzen of The Color. I caught up with him in the midst of his busy schedule. He was able to secure some time to talk with us about their journey and his journey and the Christian music industry. And there's some exciting things that they're involved with, and we want to hear about that. So, Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Well, The Color, you've been around since 2012. I think you first recorded your first album, or you started recording in 2011. And you have a distinctive sound that blends, various musical styles. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, where you guys are right now and what you're doing and some of the plans, and we'll get there. But maybe talk about your musical style and how the band develops its unique musical identity, and particularly in the realm of Christian music.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that in each season looks a little bit different. When we first made our record in 2011, 2012, that actually was the way that began was actually as my solo project. And I had done one record and I was making a second record, but the thing that was different about this time around was that there was other people involved. And so I had some bandmates that were a part of the Jordan Janzen band that were making music with me. And so one guy in particular, James, we started to just write some of these songs that were going to be part of this record. And we started to have his influence and then some of the influence of the other guys that were involved in the band. And so that first record, is really like a rock and roll record, and it is reflective of all the influences that came from the people who were involved at the time. And then we went through a process of just trying to, we got some radio success here in Canada on Christian radio, and a couple songs that weren't necessarily like pointing directly to Jesus or specifically, but had positive themes. And so when we started to make our next record, which was our Eyes Wide Open album, then we just knew that we wanted it to be a little more accessible and be a sound that could be a little more broad. And so we decided to take some of those rock elements and push them aside and lean a little more into the pop thing. And at the time we had most of the same people involved in making that record, but it was a little bit different. And we really decided to get some expertise down in Nashville and hired a producer to come alongside of us. His name's Rusty Varenkamp. And so he helped us write some songs, and he helped us really lean into what he knew about radio. He has had some success previously with some bands like 10th Avenue North. And so, I think stylistically, one of the things that has been just a constant in our process has been what is the way that we can reach the most people using our skill sets. And so I think one of the things that I bring to the table from both a writing perspective and also with my voice, being the vocalist is pop elements. And I think that pop music it does hit a pretty wide audience. And so that has been part of our process creatively of why we've sonically sounded the way that we've sounded over the years. And we've kind of, it's been interesting the last couple of records that we've been able to make, where we've been able to bring some of those initial creativities back into the music, some of the guitar driven stuff that we had done on our first record. You kind of hear a bit more of that now in our last record, our No Greater Love album. And it's a bit, I'm rambling a little bit here, but there's definitely been intentionality in each of the steps. And we haven't always known exactly where we want to go, but more and more as we've been doing this now over a decade, one of the things that is clear is that we are the sum of all parts, and we are our best when we are able to bring different creative elements from each person. And so we do work towards having that be a part of each song.
So who's involved in the writing process? And a lot of your writing really focuses on a powerful messages of faith and hope. So what themes or experiences inspire your songwriting, whether it's yourself or as a part of the band?
Yeah, well, to answer your first question, every song's a little bit different. We went many years where James and I we were the kind of co-writers, and then we bring other people to help us co-write. We learned early on that co-writing was definitely something we enjoyed. And so oftentimes that would specifically look like going down to Nashville and bringing different songwriters who work within the Christian music industry to help us write better songs. And so we did that for a lot of years. And now that James stepped out a couple of years ago, then I've been the core writer, and the process looks the same. We're bringing other people in, we're connecting mainly with songwriters who are based out in Nashville, and continue to write. The whole concept, or the whole the heart behind the color, is this idea that color brings life to the world around us. And that's what we want to do with our music. And so it's very, very specifically focused on bringing messages of hope, and not only hope in the sense of just believing that there's a God who cares for us and that we are going to be okay, but also allowing the realness of life to be a part of those songs. And so there's hope, but also life is hard. And those things, I think, those two themes you'll hear pretty consistently throughout our songs.
Right. Yeah, your album First Day of My Life received significant acclaim. So can you share sort of the inspiration behind that project and how it reflects on the band's journey?
Yeah, I mean, that's going back a few years. We've had another album since then, but I just got to go back to that place. But I do know that even just what I was speaking to, this reality that life is hard. I think one of the things that we felt we could grow on when we were going into that record is just leaning into like what's going on in our lives. Oftentimes we've written songs from a place of like, what are people going through, and how do we write songs that kind of connect with that? And this was very much the thought process for the First Day of My Life album. But then there was also just a reality that we were going through a lot of different new life things. We were getting married, and we were experiencing life on a whole different level. And so I think the reality of heartbreak, the reality of human nature, the reality of loss, and those elements, I think you can hear that in the music in a new way than maybe you previously could. And then, but also just like, I think one of the cool parts about that record was we sort of discovered that we can actually we can write fun music, and you really hear that pop guitar element in a lot of the songs in Surprise and First Day of My Life, in First Time. And so you really do get, I think, what people know as The Color as like fun energy really kind of took shape in that record.
Yeah. What about your recent record?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Now, your most current record, I mean, does over the course of writing several albums and songs, and like you say, you are where you are in the journey at that time, and now
Right.
years later, is the focus different or more or deeper, or do you find that there's a change, or the type of writing you do, you are who you are, or did it evolve?
No, I think the No Greater Love album is really the first album where we felt we were able to pull some of those original, like, this is what comes naturally to each one of us. This is like creatively who we are at our core, and instead of trying to necessarily like just write for radio, we were able to bring some of our originality back into the music. And I think that was a kind of a special season. We wrote 60 songs for that album and narrowed it down to 10. And in that process, we brought other people in, and we did a panel with our fans. Had like 150 people listen to our pick of like the top 25 songs, and they picked their top 5, and then we used that data to inform what the record was going to be. So that, I think that record as a whole is just kind of special. I don't know if we'll ever get to do that again. We recorded it all for the most part in isolation during COVID. We were at my parents' farm, and we took 14 days to just hammer out these songs. But I think what that song was a step towards, or sorry, that record was really a step towards us not only looking outwardly and saying, what do people need to hear, but looking at like what's going on in our own lives, and how can we allow those stories and that pain and that hurt and that joy and that all of those human experiences, how can we let that inform the songs, and then we can point them in a direction that can hopefully be accessible to as many people as possible. That was a really fun record. We also kind of leaned into we had 3 different, this is a bit nerdy, but we had 3 different focuses with when we picked songs for that record. Part of it there was a third of the record that was like CCM, so what you'd hear on Christian radio. There's a third of the record that's more sync focused. So that would, for us, that means just like being maybe a little bit less direct with the lyrics, a little bit more open, so that people who are not necessarily Christian music fans could connect with it. And it feels good, and it makes you move, and it makes you feel something, but it's not necessarily pointing specifically to Jesus lyric. Mm-hmm. And then the third part was worship, and that's something that we've done for all of our lives, and it's been part of our live show and a part of what we do as a band. But we were able to bring that into the album, so it's a special record.
So you've mentioned the writing stage, you've mentioned the recording stage, and each stage of a musician, you know, is very distinct, requires different kinds of skills, but one of them is performance, that to get your music out there. And you know, it's a key aspect of connecting with fans. So how do you prepare for shows? You talked about it being fun and live, and what do you do and what do you enjoy most about performing live?
How do we prepare for shows? We prepare for shows. I think that's a good question. I mean, from years ago, when we started touring back in 2012, then the process was really like, we just started to book shows. We started to call our youth pastor friends, and we were both in James and I were both in ministry realms, so we had connections, and we just started to book shows. And then when we had shows and we all of a sudden had an hour and a half that we needed to fill, then we just took the songs that we had, and then we built a show around it. And it's much like an album where you want to have an ebb and a flow, and you want to have dynamic changes. That we thought about those things, and we used to do a lot of worship covers and a lot of other covers because we didn't have very many songs. And now we're at a point in our career where we have too many songs, and we have quite a catalog of music. And so we go through the process of picking songs that we know that people are going to connect with based on what they know from being on the radio or what's streamed well online. And then we do try to create an experience as a whole that leaves people feeling uplifted and feeling encouraged and being able to have fun. And so we definitely take on an element of showmanship. We believe that the experience as a whole can be worshipful throughout, whether it's corporate worship or if there's an element of entertainment. But we do try to, we have guys in the band that play really well and can use those gifts, whether it be through a guitar solo or a percussion breakdown. And so we do try to incorporate elements of entertainment to the night as well. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting place to be now, where we have enough music, especially in Canada, where people know it, that we have to eliminate stuff, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah. Do you find that a challenge, though? Some songs that you have a message that really resonate with you, and yet say the group of people that were going through a lot of your music and helping you decide what goes on the album. Did you find that hard at all, or did you just able to leave it with them? Any regrets on some songs that you wish I got on the album?
That's a really great question. I think that everybody in the band handles it differently. I think that being uniquely being the person who's writing the music, you connect to things differently. I think that one of the beautiful things that has happened over the years is I've learned to let a lot of it go. It's not as personal as it used to be. It used to be a lot more like, I really love this song, we got to record it. And now it's like, okay, we have a lot of songs, we want to pick the ones that are going to connect best. And so I think the same rules apply for the live show. There's an element of like, you get tired of playing a song for a long time, and if I have any regrets, there is one song that people really do love that the rest of the guys really do not, and so we don't play it very often. But
funny. I was gonna ask, are there any songs that you listen to now and it's kind of like, oh, like I just don't love that song?
Yeah, I think for me, it's everything is a part of the journey, and so that part of it is kind of cool. Like, even if a song isn't great, and I feel like I've written better songs since, that's awesome. That means that was a necessary step to move forward.
That's a good way to look at it.
And yeah, I mean, I listened back to the album that I made by myself before The Color began, and there's a lot of things about it that aren't awesome, but there's something about that kid at 18, 19 years old that's really pure, and there's an honesty and I think a vulnerability that is present when nobody else is listening at the time. And so I think each one of those songs and each part of the journey is special. There's a couple songs that I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't have done that, but
I
that's
know.
a learning experience. We went through a season where we were giving a little bit more control into the hands of our producer and the people that were helping us write songs, and we were trusting them to take us to a different level, and they did.
And that's a risk. That's hard to do because, I mean, some people may not share your vision or be on the same page and take you in a direction you don't want to go. Which
Yeah,
which makes me think of the Christian music industry as it's evolving, and
right.
and how you would navigate the balance between artistic expression and meeting the expectations of your audience.
Yeah, totally. And I think what's special about the direction that the industry is moving in the Christian space is that I think social media and those different mediums where you can connect with people has really opened the floodgates pretty wide open. And whereas radio in the Christian space it's a pretty small circle, pretty small target that you gotta hit for it to sort of fit. But within those limitations, I mean, if you can push it, you can find a spot that people still connect with it, and it still lands on radio. I think it's a challenge that is actually pretty fun. It can be frustrating at times too when people don't latch onto it or radio doesn't believe in the same vision that you have for it. But like I said, when you have YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all Facebook and all these different areas where you can release music to the world, though it can be challenging and the algorithms can be a little bit intimidating and it can consume you, I think that the beautiful thing is that people can access your music at any time. And so I'm trying to look at it as half full for sure at this point.
I know it's bittersweet because it's access to everything that you want the world to have access to, but there's so much more material that it's hard to get noticed. So let's talk about the Canadian Christian music industry. I mean, people are talking about how it has changed over the years, whether the pandemic played a part, whether Spotify online streaming versus selling your CDs in stores. Churches have kind of changed their direction and I think become more insular on their congregation and what's provided. And so things have changed for an artist going out there. It's really challenging more than it used to be because there's not the places to get airplay, because like you say, radio stations have sort of a narrow kind of genre space that they want to stay within. And so I think the challenge is, I mean, for me as an artist, is that I think we need more Canadian made Christian music out there in the airwaves. And I think and talking with other people, a lot of the challenge has been is people have just kind of fell off, just kind of gone dormant, because there's not the infrastructure to support, say, a full-time music ministry. So everything's changed. How do you feel about, the industry in Canada? And is there more that people can do, say other artists out there who are listening, who want to get some help, but it's completely different terrain than say 20 years ago?
Yeah, that's a good question. One that I don't know if I have to be careful, but I think I have to be mindful of how I respond, because I mean, in some realms, I feel like we entered into the industry when things were already, when we came into the industry in 2013 and started even going down to Nashville and just getting a sense of what the Christian music industry is, because we really didn't know before. They were coming. It was a time where online music was like a real thing and people weren't selling albums, and it was pretty negative in nature. And so I think that when you speak that stuff out, I think that those things are true, but I don't know if I've ever really known anything that's been like super fruitful and different. It's always been a grind from the very beginning. And for us, one of the ways that we found that were able to sustain and turn it into something that became full-time for a number of us was touring very consistently and very often and very hard. And so we put in the work that way, and we've focused on our live show, and we've built that up. And the reality is that becomes challenging too, because at some point you've been to a lot of places many times, and so you got to create some space so people aren't just being hit over the head with the same thing over and over again. And so releasing content becomes important. That's an expensive process, and yeah, the realities of the challenges of sustaining in Canada is very real. I think there's a reality that if we would have had if you consider our success in Canada and our just the level at which people know us, the awards that we've been able to win, those types of things. If we had that same success in the U.S., I think it would be a very different story, and I think we'd be seeing a little more fruit from it financially, and just it might be a little, I don't know, easy is wrong, because there's a lot of saturation in the U.S. and we don't have that same situation. So,
and there's no criticism about, the way it is, or blaming anybody. I think it's more about, we're kind of in this place that is our common day reality. So how do we, at a grassroots level, recreate and expand and across Canada, and so we're just trying to understand it and find ways to and it's almost at a grassroots level where we're kind of starting from scratch in some ways. I mean, at least that's the input that I've been getting from other artists, and nobody's mad. Nobody's pointing fingers and saying, well, it's them or but it's just the reality. So how do we recreate opportunities where there may be not what there used to be? It's just different, and we just have to get used to the different.
Yeah. And to answer that second part of your question, I think that things you can do, I think the community part is important. I think one of the cool parts is we used to be able to go out to the GMAs, and a lot of that community moments were really helpful. But there's a reality too that in some ways we're in Manitoba, we're kind of separated from a lot of the population, and so there is a reality that some of our journey has been a bit insular. It's been us. We have our team internally. We have our people that are right around us in our support system, but that can be hard for people to find. It doesn't necessarily come naturally for other artists, and it can be its own challenge. And so I always say that one of the cool things about Canada is that Canadian radio at this point actually has something called CanCon, where they do have to play a certain amount of Canadian content by law on their radio stations. And so I think that's a pretty significant advantage for us as Canadian Christian artists. And so one of the things that we've always focused on is just making the best music we possibly can, so that radio stations want to play it. And so for us, there's certain things areas where we had lacked previously, and being able to record it at a higher quality, even just being able to write the songs at a high quality. And so we invested our time and our money into partnering with people who knew how to do it better than us, and through that have been able to grow. And I think we write better songs now on our own than we used to, and we've been able to grow in those areas, and we are releasing higher quality content. But I do believe that Canadian Christian radio wants to play Canadian Christian content. We just gotta give them the content that they want to that they can play. And so I think raising the bar in terms of our quality is important, and I think that's something that we've been challenged with, and we have taken seriously. And I know that's sometimes easier said than done, because that takes resources and finances, and that can be tough to do. But I don't know if that answers your question, but I think there's a reality of, like, you're kind of asking two different things. I think if it's about, we want more Canadian content out there, I do think that's a possibility and something that we can all work towards in terms of raising that bar better to continue to grow. And then I think that in terms of not being so alone in all of it, that's a real thing. And I think that there's certain things that we have had in place that have maybe been going a little bit stronger in terms of people's availability, and the GMA Canada organization has been an important one for us as a band, but it looks different than it did 6 years ago. So you are right in that.
Yeah. Brian Dorkson talks about it as redeveloping or developing a sense of community and mentorship. Carolyn Aarons talks about, Canadian content or Canadian made Christian material as, in some circles, we've lost the concept of supporting the arts, the Christian artists and bands creating some creative stuff, content, and in a variety of sorts. And that a lot of bands are moving more toward, certain genres, and it's not neither good nor bad. It's just, it's a reminder for us all that sense of community, and finding a place for other artists who might have good material to come back to. And I've heard it so many times, they just go away because there's nothing and there's no opportunities, and it is the way it is. but how to find a way to get them back in, to offer a sense of community, and support development and creativity. So I think it's something that people are talking about. I'm just recently had a number of conversations with different people who kind of, in a like-minded way, we need to kind of get back to basics maybe, or find a place for people to go who are creatives, who are looking, who have something to say, to find a place to do it. And so that's what we're striving for. And yeah, the GMA, I mean, it's great at trying to provide a collective of artists and opportunities. And that's great. Well, let's look at your, the goals of the future of the band. Any upcoming projects that are exciting to you, collaborations that you're particularly involved with and jazzed about?
Yeah, so right now we're in a unique season because along with The Color, I am doing solo stuff again, and that's been something that I signed a deal with a record label down in Nashville called Fair Trade about a year ago, and so I released a couple singles through that. And so the interesting thing about that is that though it's solo, it's not alone, and the guys from The Color are still a part of that process as well, on some level creatively, but also like specifically with live touring. So right now we are on a pretty extensive tour with the Newsboys. We've been touring down in the US since May, and we're going to be with them through November, and that is Jordan Janzen and The Color. And so that's been very exciting, just getting to enter into that world and see an act that's been around in a ministry for 35 plus years, and see how they do it, and see how there's been longevity, and to see changes take place and them continue to move forward. And so that's been pretty cool. But in the meantime, yeah, I've been writing for the last couple of years, and so I've collected about 50 songs, and so we are going through the process now of getting ready to release some music with The Color. And so hopefully this next year, 2025, will be a year of a lot of music from The Color, and kind of taking, for us, it's one of those things where we're all in a space where we have kids and we have families, and we would like to tour a little bit less than we have in the past. And so we are trying to come up with creative ways to get our content out there, and hopefully have people connect with it, so that when we do go on tour, it can be really effective and intentional time, but also just create some other revenue streams, and create an opportunity for people to connect with us even when we're at home. And so we're going to be working on a pretty substantial release plan for the next year, and I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about the songs that we've written. I'm excited about the songs that we're going to be working on, and we'll continue to write. And yeah, it's a good season in terms of opportunity. I'm excited about it in a new way.
Well, that's great. Well, Jordan, thanks so much for spending some time with us today and helping us learn more about you and where you've come from and where you're heading and the exciting things you're involved with. And so we want to stay along for the ride, and we'll follow your journey, and we look forward to seeing you up in Canada when you're doing one of our local shows.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time and your heart behind it all. And yeah, hopefully I can share. So hopefully some of what I've shared will connect with people.
You've been listening to Back to Back, and we thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to check us out at www.Back2BackRadio.ca. If you know a Canadian Christian artist that you want to hear on this program, let us know. Well, check us out next week right here on Back to Back.